It was a quiet night, and the deserted road seemed to be swallowed by darkness. The car's dashboard clock showed 9 p.m. My wife, my mother-in-law, and I were returning from a short vacation, enjoying the last moments of calm before going back to our routine. We were talking about our weekend plans when we decided to stop at one of those roadside shops to buy some snacks. The shop was illuminated with yellow lights that gave it a cozy atmosphere, but the road around remained shrouded in deep shadows. We bought some snacks and sodas, exchanged smiles with the attendant, and got back into the car, ready to continue our journey. We hadn't driven far when, suddenly, we saw something that made our hair stand on end. In the distance, a fragile figure on the side of the road was desperately waving, trying to get our attention. "Don't stop," my mother-in-law immediately said. "It's dangerous to talk to strangers, especially at this hour." But as we got closer, it became clear that it wasn't just anyone. It was a little girl, appearing no older than 10, with tears streaming down her face, frantically waving at us. Her desperation was palpable, and my heart tightened with concern. "Stop the car quickly," my wife implored. I hesitated for a second, but the fear and urgency in her eyes convinced me. I slowed down and pulled over. My wife rolled down the window and gently asked, "Are you lost? Are you alone?" The girl, still sobbing, desperately pleaded, "Please, let me in. It's coming, please." My wife, trying to calm her, asked who was coming, but before the girl could answer, my mother-in-law let out a scream that echoed through the night. "Oh my God, here comes the woman." The girl, trembling and wide-eyed with fear, continued to sob in the back seat while my wife tried, in vain, to calm her down. The tension in the car was palpable, each of us enveloped in a mix of disbelief and terror. The road seemed to stretch infinitely into the night's darkness, and the only sounds we could hear were the engine and the girl's sobs. "My mom, she left me with my grandmother," the girl murmured, staring fixedly at the floor. "She went away with someone else, and I was left alone with my grandmother. She was the only family I knew." My wife, still in shock, gently asked, "What did your grandmother do? Why were you so afraid of her?" The girl lifted her gaze, her eyes shining with a mix of pain and dread. "She practiced witchcraft. My grandmother and other women. They did horrible things to animals. I saw everything. Sometimes they did things to me too. Cruel things." A chill ran down my spine. My wife swallowed hard, trying to find words of comfort. "And what happened to your grandmother?" she asked, almost fearing the answer. The girl took a deep breath, her words coming out in fragments. "I couldn't take it anymore. I put poison in her food. She died. But now, even dead, she's coming after me. She made a pact with the devil. She won't rest until she gets me." At that moment, a somber silence fell over the car. The revelation was too terrifying to digest easily. My mind was spinning, trying to find a rational explanation for what we were hearing, but nothing made sense. "We need to go to the police," my wife suddenly said, her voice firm but with a noticeable tremor. "We can't take the girl home. We need help. And if this story is true, we need to protect her." I nodded, speeding up the car towards the nearest police station. As we drove, the girl kept looking back, as if expecting to see the sinister figure of her grandmother at any moment. Every minute felt like an eternity, and the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. We drove towards the police station, the silence in the car broken only by the sound of the girl's sobs and my wife's murmurs of comfort. Each mile felt like a challenge, and the deserted road seemed to conspire against us, stretching endlessly into the darkness. The girl kept looking back, her eyes wide with fear. My wife held her hand, trying to convey some sense of security. "Don't worry, dear. We're going to help you," she repeated. but I could sense the tremor in her voice. Finally, we saw the lights of the police station in the distance, a small beacon of hope in the dark night. I quickly pulled over, and we all got out, the girl still clinging to my wife. We entered the station, and the girl, still crying, was received by the officers who took her to a private room to hear her story. We stayed at the station all night, waiting for news. My wife and mother-in-law were exhausted, but none of us could leave the girl alone there. Finally, in the morning, one of the officers approached us, his expression serious and concerned. "We went to the address the girl gave us," he began hesitantly, "and we found the body of an elderly woman. She had been dead for almost 2 days. The description matches the girl's grandmother. The news shocked us deeply. How could the woman we saw on the road have been dead for so long?" Unanswered questions swirled in our minds, and the tension grew with each passing moment. "What are we going to do now?" my wife asked, her voice trembling. "We need to help this girl, but what is going on here?" The officer looked at us, clearly as perplexed as we were. "We'll need to investigate further," he said, "but for now, the girl will stay under our protection." As he spoke, I couldn't stop thinking about the sinister figure we had left on the road. Was it really the girl's grandmother? Or was something much darker happening? The girl was under police protection, and we remained at the station, unable to leave that frightened child. Morning came with a sense of unreality, as if we were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The police continued their investigations, trying to piece together a macabre puzzle. That morning, we received news that froze our hearts. The girl's grandmother's body had been found in the house, exactly as she had described. But the most disturbing part was that the signs indicated the woman had been dead for 2 days. How was it possible that the figure we saw on the road, chasing the girl, was the same deceased woman? The officer showed us photos of the body, and we immediately recognized the strange and malevolent-looking woman we had seen the previous night. It was as if evil itself had materialized to seek revenge. "I don't know how to explain this," the officer said, "but the girl insisted her grandmother had made dark pacts. Maybe there are more things in this world than we can comprehend." The girl continued to insist that her grandmother, even dead, was after her. Her eyes, filled with a terrifying conviction, reflected a fear that could not be easily ignored. My wife and I exchanged looks, both understanding that the child's reality was a torment that few could understand. Weeks passed, and the girl was taken to a foster institution, receiving psychological support and protection. We tried to move on with our lives, but what happened never left our minds. It felt as if something dark had infiltrated our souls, a constant weight from an inexplicable encounter with evil. 5 years later, we received news that brought a mixture of relief and melancholy. The girl had been contacted by an aunt, her mother's sister, who took her to live with her. We learned that the child was recovering, surrounded by love and safety, but what she had experienced would undoubtedly leave deep scars. I still remember the desperate look from that night, the tears, and the fear etched on her face. My wife and I continue to talk about what happened, trying to find a rational explanation. But deep down, we knew that some things are simply inexplicable. The encounter with the unknown marked us forever. The road that seemed endless that night became a symbol of our own journey in search of answers that may never come. And so, we live with the memory of that girl who, even in the midst of darkness, found a glimmer of hope and salvation.